The parking lot outside my childhood home smelled exactly the same as I remembered: cut grass and something fried coming from the kitchen window. I sat in my car with the engine off, hands wrapped around the steering wheel even though I wasn't going anywhere. My phone had 17 unread messages. I didn't open a single one. I'd driven 4 hours to get here. And now I was sitting in a rental car, a nice one, nicer than anything that had ever been parked on the street. And I couldn't make myself go inside. My brother's truck was already in the driveway. Of course it was. I need to back up, because none of this makes sense without the before. I grew up in a 3-bedroom house in Dayton, Ohio, the kind of neighborhood where everyone knew everyone and nobody ever really left. My father worked at a manufacturing plant for 26 years. My mother taught Sunday school and made casseroles and kept the kind of quiet that I didn't understand until I was much older. My brother, I'll call him by what he was to me for most of my life, which was simply the favorite, was 3 years older, effortlessly good at everything visible: football, grades that looked impressive on the refrigerator, handshakes with adults. He had this way of walking into a room that made my father stand up straighter. I was the other one. Not the bad one. Not the troublemaker. Just the other one. The one who read too much and talked too little. The one who spent her lunch breaks in the school library looking up things nobody had asked her to look up: interest rates, how the stock market worked, what a hedge fund actually was. I was 14 the first time I tried to explain compound interest to my father, and he looked at me like I'd started speaking a foreign language, then turned back to the game. I got a 94 on my algebra final in 7th grade. I showed him. He said, "Where'd the other 6 points go?" I laughed because I thought he was joking. He wasn't looking at me anymore. The comparison started early and never really stopped. My brother got a car for his 16th birthday. I got a "we'll see" that became a silence that became nothing. I didn't complain. I got a job at a diner 3 blocks from school and saved every dollar I made. My father thought this was practical. He said so once in a tone that made practical sound like the opposite of impressive. A thing that broke something in me, not permanently, but enough that I still feel the scar of it, happened the spring of my junior year. I'd applied, on my own, without telling anyone, to a summer program at Ohio State, a 6-week intensive for high school students interested in economics and finance. It was competitive, 240 applicants from across the state. I got one of 30 spots. I came home with the acceptance letter on a Tuesday. My father was sitting at the kitchen table with my brother, going over college brochures. Big state schools, football programs, the kind of campuses that look good in photographs. I put the letter on the table. My father picked it up. "Read it." Set it back down. "Economics," he said. "Yes. That's not a real major. It's a summer program, not a major, but it could lead to—" "Your brother got invited to the regional scouting camp," he said. He wasn't looking at me. He was already looking back at my brother. "That's something real." My mother was at the sink. I watched her hands stop moving for just a second. Then she went back to washing the dish in her hands. I picked up my letter and went to my room. Later that night, she knocked on my door. She sat on the edge of my bed and didn't say anything for a while. Then she said, "You should go to the program. Dad doesn't think I know what your father thinks." She said it quietly, the way she said most things. "I'm telling you what I think." She handed me an envelope. Inside was $3,000 in cash. Money she'd been saving, she told me, from her piano lesson students over the past 2 years. She'd never mentioned the savings. I hadn't known about it. I cried. She patted my hand and told me not to make a big deal of it. I went to that program. It changed everything. That summer, I met a professor named Dr. Whitfield, who told me in week 2 that I had a natural instinct for pattern recognition in market behavior. I didn't know what to do with that sentence. I wrote it down in a notebook and read it back to myself on the bus home at the end of the 6 weeks. I applied to colleges that fall. I applied very specifically to schools with strong finance programs. My father wanted me to go to the local community college. He said it was practical. He said my brother's school, the big state program with a football camp connection, cost enough for one family. "We can't afford to send 2 kids to 4-year schools," he said. "I have scholarships," I said. "How much?" I told him. He was quiet. And I'll work, I added. I already know how to work. He didn't tell me I couldn't go. He also didn't tell me he was proud of me. He said, "Don't come crying to us when it gets hard," and went back to watching television. I left for school in August. My mother hugged me for a long time in the driveway. My father waved from the porch. My brother didn't come home from his own school to say goodbye. He was busy. That was fine. College was the first place I had ever felt correctly sized. I don't mean I was the smartest person there. I wasn't, and that was actually part of what I loved about it. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who thought the way I did, who got excited about the same dense, nerdy things, who didn't look at me sideways when I wanted to talk about monetary policy at dinner. I worked 20 hours a week at the campus tutoring center. I lived in the cheapest housing available. I sent my mother money when I could. Not as repayment yet, just something. She always texted back, "Not necessary," and I always sent it anyway. I graduated with honors. I had a job offer before graduation, a financial analyst position at a firm in Chicago. Real salary, benefits, a desk in a building with windows that went from floor to ceiling. I called home. My mother said, "I knew it. I always knew it." My father said, "Chicago's expensive?" I said, "I know. I can afford it." He didn't say anything after that. Chicago was hard and wonderful in equal measure. The work was demanding in ways that felt good. The kind of hard that builds something rather than just wears you down. I was the youngest person on my team by 4 years. I made mistakes. I learned from them faster than I expected to. My manager, a sharp woman in her 50s who had no patience for excuses and an extraordinary eye for talent, took notice. By year 3, I was being pulled into client meetings I had no business being in. By year 4, I was leading them. I didn't talk about any of this at home. When I came back for holidays, which I did, because my mother was there and she was always worth coming back for, I kept conversations light. How's the house? How's church? How's the team doing this year, I'd say, gesturing vaguely toward whatever sport my brother was currently watching on television. My brother had come back to Dayton after graduation. He worked at a car dealership. He was perfectly happy. I want to be clear that I hold nothing against him. He wasn't the villain of my story, he was just the unintentional measuring stick, and neither of us had chosen that. My father still asked him about his sales numbers at dinner. He never asked me about mine. At some point, I stopped noticing. Or maybe I just stopped minding. The work had become its own world, and that world was expanding in ways I hadn't imagined, and it didn't require my father's attention to be real. The article came out on a Thursday morning. It was a profile piece. A journalist had approached my firm 6 months earlier wanting to write about women under 35 who were reshaping mid-market investment strategy. My manager had recommended me. I'd agreed, half convinced nothing would come of it. It came out in a national business publication. Not the Wall Street Journal, but close enough. The kind of thing that sits in waiting rooms in law firms and accounting offices across the country. The kind of thing that people's fathers read. I found out it was a problem on a Sunday. I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a man named Gary, one of my father's oldest friends, someone I'd known peripherally my whole life, the kind of adult who existed at the edges of childhood as a voice and a handshake and a face at barbecues. "I saw your picture," Gary said, "in the magazine at my doctor's office. Took me a minute because your hair's different, but then I read the name." He paused. "Your dad know about this? He knows I work in finance," I said carefully. Long pause on Gary's end. He seemed to be searching for the right word. He know about all of it? "We don't talk about work much," I said. There was another pause. "Well," Gary said finally, "I'm real proud of you. Just so you know." He hung up. I sat with my phone in my hand for a moment. Then I got back to work. My father called 3 days later. He didn't mention the article directly at first. He asked how Chicago was. He asked if I was eating. These were not questions he had historically asked, and so they landed strangely, like furniture moved 2 inches from where it's always been. Then he said, "Gary called me." I waited. "Said he saw something about you, in a magazine." "Yes," I said. "There was a profile piece." He said, "You're My father stopped. I could hear him exhale. He said it was a big deal. It was a nice piece, I said. I was glad to be included. Another silence. How long? My father asked. How long what? How long has it been like this? The way Gary was describing it. I thought about the question. Really thought about it. A while, I said. He didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. We stayed on the line together for what felt like a very long time, and something passed between us that didn't have a name, not exactly. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't resolution. It was more like recognition. The moment when a person finally sees something they've been standing too close to. Your mother knew, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Another silence. She never said anything. No, I said, she wouldn't. He asked me to come home for Easter. This was unusual. It was always my mother who extended those invitations. The fact that it came from him meant something, even if I wasn't sure what. I sat in that rental car in the parking lot of my childhood street for 11 minutes. I know because I watched the clock. Then I got out, walked up the driveway and went inside. My father was in the kitchen. Not the living room with the television, not the porch. The kitchen, standing somewhat awkwardly near the counter. The way people stand when they've arrived somewhere before they plan to and aren't sure what to do with themselves. He looked older. I don't know why this surprised me. You look good, he said. Thanks, so do you. My mother came in from the other room and the moment fractured into activity, food and catching up, and my brother arriving 20 minutes later with his girlfriend. And for a while it was just a regular Easter. After dinner, after dishes, my brother took his girlfriend for a walk, and my mother excused herself with suspicious convenience, leaving me and my father at the kitchen table with 2 mugs of coffee. He wrapped his hands around his mug, stared at it. I didn't know what to do with you, he said. When you were growing up. You were, he shook his head. You didn't fit the picture I had. I didn't say anything. That's not an excuse, he said. I know it's not. No, I agreed. It's not. He nodded. Like he'd expected that and respected it. I made you feel like you were less than him. Less than. He stopped. That wasn't right. None of that was right. There was a part of me, a younger part, that had been waiting for the sentence for approximately 20 years. I thought it would feel bigger than it did. Not that it felt small, it didn't. But it felt human-sized, like something a real person said in a real kitchen, not a closing scene from a movie. I know you worked harder than I ever gave you credit for, he said. I know that you know that now, I said. That was the most honest thing I could offer him, and I think he understood it. It was not the same as saying things were okay. It was not the same as saying the years of small disapprovals and turned away eyes and comparisons hadn't accumulated into something I'd spent my entire adult life quietly trying to outrun. But it was something. Before I left, I went to find my mother. She was in the garden, doing things to soil that I'd never understood, wearing the same canvas hat she'd worn in that garden since I was 8 years old. I sat on the back porch steps and watched her for a minute. He apologized, I said. She didn't look up. I know. Did you talk to him? Before I came? She considered this with the same quiet she'd brought to every difficult moment of my childhood. I told him that if he wanted a relationship with his daughter, he needed to be the one to make it happen. That I'd spent 20 years watching him not see you and I was tired. I didn't know she'd said that. I felt something move in my chest. Mom, don't make a fuss. She patted some dirt into place. I should have said it sooner. You gave me the money, I said. The piano lesson money. $3,000. She said it like it was a small thing. That money got me to a program that changed how I thought about everything. It was. I stopped. I want you to know that I know what that meant, what it cost you. She was quiet for a moment. I want to do something, I said. For you. Anything. The house, a trip, whatever you want. She looked up at me then, the first time she'd fully looked at me since I'd sat down. I just want you to keep calling me, she said. I laughed. It came out a little wet. That I can do, I said. She went back to her garden. I sat on the steps in the afternoon light in the backyard of the house I'd grown up in, and I didn't try to make the moment into anything other than what it was. A daughter and her mother. Some old grief going softer around the edges. An ordinary Sunday that mattered more than it looked. I drove back to Chicago the next morning, 4 hours alone with my thoughts, which I had learned over many years to treat like data, useful, worth examining, not worth catastrophizing. My father and I were not going to become something we had never been. I wasn't going to call him every week. He probably wasn't going to fully understand what I did or why it mattered. Not really. Not in his bones. But he had shown up to that kitchen table. That was worth something. Not everything, but something. I had stopped needing my father's approval somewhere around my second year in Chicago, in the particular way that you stop needing a thing once you've built a life that doesn't require it. That's not the same as not wanting it. It's just that wanting something and requiring it are different weights to carry, and I'd learned the difference. I thought about what Gary had said on the phone. "I'm real proud of you." An old man at a doctor's office, reading a magazine, recognizing a girl he'd seen at barbecues growing up, now described in print as someone reshaping the way a certain corner of the financial industry worked. There was something I'd been meaning to do and kept putting off. When I got back to my apartment, I transferred money into my mother's bank account. Enough to cover the $3,000, with what I calculated was fair interest for the years between. Then a little more, because there's no interest rate that accounts for belief. For someone seeing you when no one else bothered to look. She texted me that evening, this was not necessary. I typed back, I know. That's not why I did it. She sent a single heart emoji. For my mother, that was practically a speech. I made dinner. I went to bed. I got up the next morning and went to work, the same as I had every day for years, building something in a city far from a 3-bedroom house in Dayton, Ohio. Something that had always been mine. That no one had handed me. That had started, really, with a woman in a canvas hat slipping an envelope under my door and saying, "Go." I was still going. I've thought a lot about what it actually takes to outlast the story someone else writes about you. Not overcome it. Not prove it wrong in some dramatic, public way. Just outlast it. Keep going long enough that the story loses its grip. Not because someone finally acknowledged they were wrong, but because you built something so real, so yours, that the old story simply stops fitting. My father wasn't a cruel man. I want to say that because it matters. He was a man with a fixed idea of what success looked like, and I didn't match it. That's not innocence on his part. The damage was still real. The years of being turned away from were still real. But understanding where something comes from doesn't excuse it. It just makes it easier to put down. What I've come to believe, not from a book, not from anyone handing me a lesson, but from living the long middle of this story, is that the quality of your choices over time becomes the quality of your life. That's it. It's not poetic. It's almost boring in how simple it is. My mother made a choice to slip me an envelope and say go. I made a choice to go. Dr. Whitfield made a choice to tell me the truth about what he saw in me. Gary made a choice to pick up the phone. My father eventually made a choice to sit at that kitchen table and say the hard thing out loud. Every single one of those choices had weight. None of them were nothing. The thing about integrity, real integrity, not the bumper sticker version, is that it's mostly invisible. It's what you do when the outcome isn't guaranteed. My mother didn't give me that money because she knew I'd succeed. She gave it to me because she thought I deserved the chance to find out. That's a different thing entirely. She didn't need the ending to justify the action. She just believed the action was right. That's what I want to carry forward. Not the part where things worked out, but the part where people acted right before they knew they would. Resilience, I've learned, is not toughness. It's not gritting your teeth and pushing through. It's something quieter, a decision made again and again that the thing you're building matters more than the resistance you're facing. There were years in Chicago that were genuinely hard. Years where I second-guessed everything. The difference between staying and quitting wasn't that I was stronger than doubt. It was that I'd seen what not going looked like and I couldn't unknow it. My father and I will probably never be easy with each other. We're too old in our respective patterns for that. But he showed up to that kitchen table and I showed up to that driveway, and somewhere in the space between those two things, something shifted. Not fixed, shifted. That's enough? I sent my mother the money, not because it settled anything, but because the right thing has a timing. And I'd let too much time pass already. Doing it late is not the same as not doing it. That's something I believe in, the possibility of doing the late right thing and having it still count. I'm still building. I'll probably always be building. And the version of me that sat in the back of the bus going home from that Ohio State summer program, reading a sentence someone said about her back to herself over and over, she deserved to know that it was going to be okay. More than okay.